everybody. I'm Jamie. I'm the Program Director at 93.3 CFMU, and we are here on CFMU.ca talking to some folks about music and indie music and the future of music during the time of COVID, which seemed like a timely thing to do. And I am joined by a really great panel today. I'll go counterclockwise just for fun. I don't know if it'll show up on the screen in the end result counterclockwise, but we got Tim Potocic from Sonic Onion and Supercrawl. We got Brodie Schwendiman from the Casbah and Luke Bentham from Dirty Nil.
What's up?
Thanks for coming on, guys. I appreciate you taking the time. And the first thing I want to get to right away is basically when did it hit you that this was going to be something that was going to be a problem to overcome? It was going to be a challenge to face. I know that for me, it was the day that the student union who runs the station just said, that's it, no volunteers. And suddenly it was real, like on the spot. It was real for me. We had to figure out where we were going from there with no warning. So we'll start with Tim. And just tell me, like, was there a moment when you realized this was going to be something serious?
I've been very, very optimistic the whole time, starting to wear down a little, but I have a date, I think still, behind me, COVID-19 over May 11th or 18th. That I wrote in March. I'm like, there's no way we're going to be doing, it'll all be back in business by then, and we're going to run Supercrawl, and it's going to be amazing. Well, now I'm going to probably put like 2022 attached to that or something. I don't know, because who knows when this is going to go on. So for me, that was the reality, and we've just been trying to do whatever we can in the meantime. Like as the phases phased in, obviously now we're able to do some things, really challenging doing them for a million ways we'll talk about. But that was basically, that's where we're at. We're just sort of trucking ahead, based in phase 3 and what we're allowed to do, we're doing. And then we'll just see where the future takes us.
And what about you, Brodie?
Gosh, seems like so long ago that this all started that some of the things that happened, I don't even remember them happening anymore, So as far as a realization that this was going to be a long-term problem that we would have to deal with, maybe mid-April, I guess. At that point, there was no response from the province about how they would help the hospitality industry, the venue industry. So we were all kind of just guessing what we should do. And I'm sure Tim can attest to this. There was conversations between promoters and agents where we're putting holds on shows, and we're still sending offer sheets in on things that we had no idea whether they could even happen yet or not. And then eventually those kind of conversations just stopped for a while, because then it was, okay, this is going to be like next year. Now those conversations are picking back up again, but there was that, I guess the realization was probably when those conversations with booking agents stopped. That's when I knew this was going to be a long-term problem.
Yeah. And Luke, you were kind of on the opposite end of that, right? Like you're the one who was on the other end of that conversation in terms of booking shows and things. What was it with the band? When did you guys sort of say, like, man, our summer tour might have to be canceled on this?
Well, this thing really spiked up in an acute way while we were recording our album. Can I say the title and then you can bleep it out?
Go for it.
It's called Art, and it's out on New Year's Eve. But anyways, we were in the studio in March, and we had our producer, John Goodmanson from Seattle, down with us. And we were doing just a bit of pre-production in Hamilton the week before we went to the studio. And every day, more when we took a break, we would kind of check in with the internet and see that more bad news was coming in, including the Kobe helicopter crash, and the COVID awareness was really kind of spiking at that point. But we just kind of put our heads down because we were, it was a year and a half worth of working on music going in to record it. So we just tried to focus on that. And the realization for me that this was going to be a really big deal was definitely when our producer, John, had to catch the last flight out of Canada to Seattle because they were closing the border. And we'd only tracked drums and bass for the record. And I was faced with the option of, well, you can either push pause on this and we'll revisit it whenever we can, which is a huge problem of momentum, which is something that I view as crucial when you're recording. or you can try and get all the guitars done in 2 days because that's when the city locks down. So I opted for the latter, which was a wild strain of an adventure, but we got it done. And then we did the record. We did all the vocals basically over a couple weeks in April, and then just sent them back to Seattle for John to mix them. So we kind of only got halfway through our record before COVID shut everything down. So that was when I knew that this was serious.
Yeah, it's weird though. Nowadays, I mean, at least you weren't in the middle of a tour. Like the recording, as difficult as it was something that you still continued to do remotely in some fashion, right? Yeah. So in a weird way, that was probably all right. But what had you guys planned to do all summer? Were you going on the road?
Yeah, well, we had summer festivals booked overseas in the States, a couple things in Canada, but mostly in the States and overseas. And I mean, this was our year of kind of gearing up for a recording or for a release. So we didn't have as many road gigs as we would have booked for next year. Yeah, it was just basically mostly the year was dedicated to setup. So in that way, we were a little bit fortunate. We weren't on cycle. So this affected a lot of our peers in a more dramatic and negative way than it affected us.
Yeah. But still, there was a point at which you had to pause and reevaluate and figure out how you were going to go forward doing this.
Brodie, definitely threw a monkey wrench in our gears.
Yeah, for sure. Brodie, now obviously at some point, just like the band, you had to decide that you had to continue somehow. So after that moment when those conversations stopped and it paused, what did you do? What did you proceed to do? What kind of ideas did you start to come up with to try to keep going? Because the Casbah is still with us, and Sonic Onion, Supercrawl are still with us, and Dirty Nil are still around. All of you have managed to stay afloat. But in those early days, like, how did you grapple with this?
I put a lot of my time into some lobbying work, some meeting up online with as many venue owners across the country as we could to kind of put a team of people together and sort of organize a plan on how to lobby the government for funding that might help us through the waiting period. So the Canadian Live Music Association branched off into an independent venue coalition, and Casbah was part of that. And I mean, there's dozens of venues in the coalition, but there's about a half dozen operators, me being one of them, that kind of met every day and sort of thought things through about rent and insurance and how much money we could ask for. And then we kind of just had conversations in kind of partnership with the Live Music Association. And so that was where a lot of my time was going in the spring months. Was sort of, okay, since we can't generate revenue in the traditional way right now because we're all locked down, we need funding from something. And we're these for-profit operations, right, that usually don't have access to the funding that the not-for-profits can get to. So we had to kind of convince and show the government that this entity of business needs financial support too.
Yeah. Tim, what about you?
Similar in some respects. I'm involved with SEMA, so we've been doing a lot of lobbying directly to government, lots of conversations with ministers and whatnot to support, not only the live business, but management business, the artists themselves, and the label side. So there's a lot of moving parts, publishers as well, sorry. So I mean, just advocating on behalf of a lot of people. So there was a lot happening there. Seeing what dollars could get flowed through Heritage to Factor, and now that phase 1 and phase 2 are out now, which is great. I think it's helped a considerable amount of people. Not everybody, I don't think, but I think it's helped a lot of people. And then we had some real serious, hard business discussions too. Like initially, quite immediately, we did a big layoff, but had everybody on our staff around the table, had frank discussion about the fact that we're taking this pause to do this, but everybody will be back. We're at the point now where pretty much everybody's back. The only issue we have is that Mills Hardware can't open because we can only socially distance 20 people in there. So it's, for all intents and purposes, closed, and I expect closed till next September. That's the timeline we're putting on it, and that's a pretty hard pill to swallow, but that's basically what we've got to manage around. We have another space that we were supposed to open in April. Obviously that didn't happen, but we're outfitting it right now because we can socially distance 50 people in there. So we have a series of shows that we're doing with 50 people, and again, we're lucky that Supercrawl is basically because we have to spend some of the money that we receive through grants, we're using that money to help backstop some of the guarantees, because obviously 50 people in a lot of cases in the 100 capacity rooftop shows that we just did, we weren't selling enough ticket revenue to be able to pay the guarantees that the bands are demanding still. Which is rightly so. We want to put that money back into the hands of artists and production companies so that we're hiring our production company again, and people have jobs, and we're putting money in the hands of artists because we're lucky enough to have it to be able to do it. So that's what we're doing. So that's part of our mandate for the next, till the end of the year. And then we're going to figure out where we are from January to March. And we're playing it, day by day. Again, tomorrow, the 50 people that are going to be able to come to the shows in the fall, maybe they can't come. Tomorrow could get shut down, and then those shows are all just live streamed. They're not, there'll be no in-person component to it, even though it's only 50. I mean, my hope is that we ultimately, I've been holding my fingers crossed very tightly that at least if we can stay to 50 people, then we can manage to work with artists. At some point, soon, the guarantees that will have to more resemble what 50 people look like in a room. And we're going to have to figure out a way to manage that. I'm not really sure how we actually do that right now, but we're working on some kind of plan to figure that out. I think it's very doable, and I think there'll be a lot of hungry artists still that want to perform and have an option to do it, right? And whether that's packing in 2 or 3 shows in one day, it's 50 people, you're in, you're out. 50 people, you're in, you're out. And then maybe being able to manage something like that, that's an option. Continuing to maybe do outdoors with 100 people. I know Brodie's doing outdoor shows in his parking lot now, and I'm interested to see how that worked out for him. We did some, and they're so challenging. There's just so many more things you need to do on top of running a show that normally you would run, and probably a whole lot more than 100 people would come to. So you're trying to keep your optimism up, but ultimately at the end of the day, there's 100 people in an audience that would normally, for example, see Tim Hicks. He could sell, 1,500, 2,000 tickets in Hamilton when he does a show for 100 people. So 100 people show up. It's yay.
I want to talk about those outdoor shows too, for sure. But I want to go back to Luke for a sec and say that so you guys managed to sort of remotely continue pushing as you normally would. You had a single, you did a video, you had some pretty great, clever ideas to promote it. I saw Hasselhoff talk kind of up the band and stuff like that. That was pretty cool. But when it comes to getting back out there and doing any kind of live show, has it even been discussed, considered, or what would you find yourselves comfortable doing, assuming the laws and bylaws allow anything? What have you guys been thinking about?
Well, I mean, in terms of long range discussions, it's really tough to form any kind of ideas right now, just because it seems to be a very tenuous situation with the stages and the reopening, and there could be a regression back to a first stage depending on, there's just a lot of conflicting information right now. And to protect, as we've discussed, our optimism, I think we've kind of been conservative in terms of our plans for playing live. But I mean, we're exploring some local opportunities to do some limited capacity shows in Hamilton, which we're very optimistic about. But again, it's just it's a minute by minute type of situation. I was talking to the Sadies the other day, and they have shows booked in November in Europe, and apparently those shows are still on, but it's another question about whether they want to get on the plane or not. which is an important question that, the artists have to ask themselves. Because, in all of this, I often forget that there's a reason why everything's closed down. It's sometimes I forget the risk and what is on the other side of that risk. So we're not really aggressively looking at a whole lot of opportunities outside of our immediate vicinity right now for those reasons. I've heard that next year the government might be opening things up to Canadian artists to play across the country, but again, can't this is hearsay at this point. So all of our efforts right now are just 100% focused on playing within the parameters that we're currently facing, and these kind of zany online promotion attempts, which are actually really well, but it's a bizarre thing right now that as a musician, 90% of my job has transitioned to be working online, which is a strange because frankly, I hate the internet, but my job is right now working on the internet, which is, I don't mind because, we've had to adapt, but certainly just want to be able to play shows. But I find from the artist side, a lot of my friends and peers are constantly posting things about how they just miss playing shows, which is a feeling that obviously we all share. But I think the most important attitude right now is to focus on what you can do and not on what you can't, because there's a whole world of possibilities online, even though the internet is a flaming garbage dumpster. But it's a very strange time. But I would just encourage all musicians to just take a look at what your possibilities are and really divert your efforts on what you can do. And rather than sitting around doing nothing. I think that's the worst thing you can possibly be doing right now, which I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are doing.
I think it's good advice, especially because, Tim, I did get to go to one of your Skytop series shows. I checked out the Scratch Bastard show on the last night, and I was watching him do his thing, and it was, by normal standards, a weird thing. Chairs spaced out, so what kind of crowd he'd have. But that guy was like ear-to-ear grins, just thrilled to be in front of people. And it was like emanating off the guy, you could tell. So it sounds like Luke's advice is good. Focus on what you can do. It's probably going to be not as bad as you think it's going to be, because you're going to get out there and edge your way towards normalcy eventually. That was what you guys did in the interim, was you were planning, you were figuring things out on all levels, but the one thing the public got to see that you guys did was that series of shows. How challenging was that? You said there's a lot of challenges, we'll talk to Brodie about this too, a lot of challenges about doing an outdoor show. I thought you guys had your stuff together. I mean, it was like really well put together, really felt safe, frankly. But on your end, what was it like setting that up?
Just a lot of extra work, and it's fine. We're into the work. Everybody was into doing what we were doing. So excited to actually have something happening, because it's the first shows that we've thrown for 6 months. And that's very unusual. So a lot of protocols, spraying chairs, surfaces where people were touching. We've got this little mister thing, and it's really fast. You go and mist everything, and in 10 minutes, everything's dry and COVID free. So we were doing that between the shows, in between the shows when we had matinees. But the one thing I do want to mention just about the shows, that's sort of an observation, obviously, because we were, there's 100 people and it is what it is. But we found the evening shows were all sold out, and the matinees weren't. They did okay, but they weren't as well sold as the evenings. But the 4 evening shows, all of them sold out. But on average, every one of those shows, 20 people didn't check in. And when you only have 100 seats and 20 people don't check in after they've paid good money for a ticket, we were just like, wow. And it happened the first night with Tim Hicks, and that was the most expensive ticket. And we thought, wow, that's weird. And then we're like, well, let's see if it happens again. And it happened again for Lee Harvey, and it happened again for the Sadies, and it happened again for Scratch Bastard. We're just like, man, like to me, my feeling was that anybody that's like going out there to buy a ticket is like me, like super optimistic. I'm going, nothing's going to stop me type of thing. But clearly it's not. And I thought, and that really hit me pretty hard, to be honest, like people buying tickets and not going to the shows, when I thought the people that would be buying tickets were the absolute diehards that would go to a show no matter what, if they're going to spend their money. So that's just the one thing. And we're going to watch that as we do the other shows that are happening. Sorry.
It's okay. Well, Tim, though, you got to wonder, like, it might have been people who in the last minute got scared, but it might have been people who never intended to go and just want to support the scene.
I suppose. I guess what my advice to them would be, that's amazing to support the scene, very into it, absolutely. But it is also really disheartening, potentially. None of the artists felt this way, but it is a thing. Like when there's 20 empty chairs and they're 6 feet apart from one another, and they're glowing white chairs, like, like patio chairs outside, it's pretty noticeable. And it, like, that's 20% of the audience. It definitely can affect the vibe of what is happening and the artist that's on the stage. So that was my immediate thinking, was like, I didn't care about us, people bought the tickets, great, but the artists have to look out into this weird, 115 foot by like 100-foot area where there's chairs distanced and there's a whole bunch of people missing. So anyway, just a funny thing. Like we'll be encouraging people for the 50 capacity shows that we're doing. Like, we'll be messaging ticket holders all the way up to the day. If you can't make it, please give your ticket to somebody else. So, because these ones will only be 50 people, so it's even fewer.
Yeah, exactly.
Room, and we want to have some kind of vibe,
Yeah, for sure. Brodie, you did two different things. You got into doing this the outdoor shows, but also, of course, you opened up your patio and had DJs. What was that process like for you? It must have been challenging to, first of all, I know you've wanted to have that patio going for more than a couple of years. Awful way to make it finally happen, but good that it finally happened.
Good that it finally happened, yes. Yeah. When the conversation about patios potentially happening through Jason Thorne's office begun, that's when I started changing my idea of what my focus should be on with the business. And so arguably for the last 3-4 months, we've been a pub restaurant more than we've been anything musical. Again, using that for-profit argument, our margins are just so tight, right? There's no other source of revenue coming in to fund something, right? So if you try to do a live event, it's all, for me, based on the ticket sales. There's a little bit of sponsorship, but it's not to the magnitude that a festival can have. So, taking reference to what Tim mentioned earlier, if someone doesn't come to the show under a Casbah arrangement, that's also a group of people that aren't purchasing beverages or food at the event, and that's the revenue driver for a bar venue, is that stuff, right? The ticket sales and the sponsorship dollars. They're going to pay for the production, they're going to pay for the artist, but it's the concessions that we're relying on. So when there's a no-show in our type of a show, that's a huge hit on the concession side.
Yeah.
So because those margins have been so tight, it just didn't seem like it made a lot of sense to try too many live shows, because how would artists get paid fairly? How would staff get paid fairly? The revenue that's generated just isn't large enough to really pull it off on a regular basis. So we we did a couple outdoor things in the parking lot. We did one with B.A. Johnson and Lee Reed that sold out, and it was quite a successful night. It didn't make money per se. It was just a nice thing to do as a profiling thing to show the community that we're not giving up, that we're going to keep doing something. And those artists took pay cuts to make that happen. They could have made more money doing a regular old show inside a bar pre-COVID, but they wanted to do something, and we wanted to do something too. So, but yeah, going back to the original point, we've been a restaurant since early July, right? Trying to figure out what to sell food wise and how to change our drink menu, and activating things like online reservation platforms so people can book their tables, and then all that COVID sanitization, health board protocol stuff has been a reality for that too. pretty extensive what you have to do as a restaurant. Less so, I think, than a concert. Tim had a much harder burden by having to turn over an event onto another event in the same day. My B.A. Johnson show, it was just the one show. So it wasn't like we had to turn the room over and get it ready for the next one. So it was a lot less labor intensive that way. But what I was quite happy about with that one was that the neighborhood had no issues. We didn't get any complaints over my telephone. City Hall didn't call me the next Monday and talk about anything that they heard. Nobody physically showed up and raised issue. So that was quite nice. We kept it to an 11 o'clock curfew, and it was a rock show. And all four of us know the creative content that comes out of the mouth of both B.A. Johnson and Lee Reed. It was not children friendly, and the profanity that was coming over the microphone was echoing through downtown Hamilton, and we had no problems. So that was great. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, defunding the police message was loud and clear at the Casbah.
I imagine so.
Yeah.
So I guess we're getting on a bit here, so I do want to kind of wrap it up a little bit. My second to last question is going to be stepping back a bit just from your own personal experiences and trying to think more broadly, which I'm sure you've all done as well. What do you think the community or the government or whomever has to do in order to keep things alive through the rest of this, which could be, I don't want to get too depressing. We all know it could be a long time. We're looking at like next summer at the earliest for anything, I would think, but maybe worse. We don't know. What do you think is going to make a difference in terms of what fans can do, artists can do, the government can do, starting with Luke?
Well, I'd say the number one thing is stay positive. Just as I said before, just really hammer down on the things that you can do. Try and think outside the box. Try and spot gaps about where people are thinking and try and fill those gaps. There's a vast expanse of tools at your fingertips using the internet. So just, put your noodles together and see what you can come up with. The other thing that I would say is for fans out there, it's never been a more important time to support the artists that you really like. And, a lot of people are doing Bandcamp Fridays where 100% of the revenues goes toward the artist. So really keep your eyes out, which speaking of that, it's today. So see what your favorite band's putting up and buy something, support your local venues in the ways that you can, and go down and have a pint when you can. And these are the places where we play. So, make sure you're aware that all of these are part of the precious ecosystem that constitute live music. So just put your money where your mouth is, I would say, and don't despair.
Brodie, how would you answer that?
Everything that Luke said. But then on the government side, the conversation has to be continuous between the music industry and the government. They need to be reminded, and that there needs to be an emphasis that shows them what the economic impact of a lack of a live and music industry in general means for the country, right? From an employment side, from a creative side, revenue drivers, taxes. It's a conversation that can never stop. And even beyond going back to normal, the damage that will be done will still need to be addressed once things are back to normal. So yeah, for sure. It's a constant conversation with the government.
Tim?
Yeah, I agree with everybody so far, of course. The wage subsidy has been hugely important for us. It'll keep our staff employed so we can keep everybody on as long as that is going, and as long as the caps can remain low. It's challenging for us to make much money. So that is hugely important. I know it's been extended to the spring. So that also made me scared, because as soon as I saw them extended to the spring, I thought they know something we don't know. Yeah, that's something that's huge. And we're going to continue to lobby. SEMA will continue to lobby the Canadian Live Music Association, municipalities, and hopefully our municipality will do something on the property tax side for some venues that have to pay that burden. you know, I know that the rental subsidy for landlords that's gone. Well, I mean, they extended it to September, but I don't know if it's going to go any further than that. So that's helpful for some, for sure too. And yeah, I think that's, you know, pretty much it. We'll lobby and see if we can't, you know, keeping funding sources at least the way they are right now. So Factor is fully funded, and Canada Council and OAC, and, you know, I guess one of my other things would just be like, you know, if we can just hold steady, if we can hold steady through this awful period. We're in an awful period right now, the next month, right? Very critical. The numbers are going up. They're going to continue to go up. But if we can hold steady somehow at phase 3, and we get into next year and we're still there, then I have a lot of hope again, like to the point where, you know, venue caps will go from 50 to 75 maybe, or 100. And then maybe social distancing and mask rules, you keep that sort of stuff. You keep all those things happening. Like, I think it's really important for people to do that. And that's how we're keeping people safe. And if people adhere to those types of things, we can continue to push the boundaries to, you know, hopefully by spring, at the very latest, hopefully by January, Brodie's up to full capacity again. You know what I mean? Like, and then, you know, keep all the rules in place, but we can be at full capacity and keeping people safe. So those are my hope.
Well, this lovely free program that we're all using way too much is going to run out of time any second. So real quick, around counterclockwise again, promote what you got. Tim.
We have a free concert series for Supercrawl running from October all the way to the end of the year. We've announced October and November artists, and we have December artists coming after that. And we will continue to promote and do 50 capacity shows and outdoor 100 capacity shows till we run out of money.
Awesome. Brodie.
Still working the patio. We're keeping it nice and warm with patio heaters and making that experience as deep into the winter as we can go. Still doing a lot of Zoom and Twitch TV type DJ events that you can enjoy from home online as well. Our 80s night, which is the first Saturday of every month, keeps going online. Mark at Dr. Disc doing a great job promoting that. And we'll be starting a live programming inside as well. The first week in November, we're going to be doing some. We can't do 50. We're going to do about 38 to 42 people because that's what our space allows. And we're probably going to focus on the local scene as much as we can for the first little while. And so perhaps artists that typically wouldn't get a Friday night at the Casbah in the past are now going to have access to getting a Friday night at the Casbah. So that's kind of exciting.
For sure. And Luke.
Well, we've got a tour, a virtual socially distanced tour called the Dancing to Thrash Tour that starts on the 13th of October. It's kind of a mixture of a live Nil show and the Tim and Eric show. It's going to be absurd. It's going to be loud. It's going to be wild. So we're splitting the money with some American venues that we are booked at on this tour, and we have merch associated with that. But most importantly, we have an album called Art coming out on New Year's Eve, your grandma's favorite album. So check it out.
Awesome. Tim from Sonic Onion, Brodie from the Casbah, and Luke from Dirty Nil. Thanks for being on today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Jamie.
See you later.